Caleb Winslow never thought he'd be stranded in his own city. Not like this. Not in the middle of a Tuesday. The morning had started as any other. Packed calendar, phone vibrating nonstop, assistant mumbling logistics about a board meeting he was already late for. But all of that unraveled the second he made the wrong turn onto 38th Street, a narrow shortcut he'd taken a dozen times without thinking. Only this time, something felt off. The moment the doors to his Porsche locked from the outside, the sound was too clean, too intentional. He was out of the car before he could argue. 3 men, fast and efficient. No screams, no weapons, no threats. Just a silent, professional robbery. They took everything: phone, wallet, car keys. They even made him toss his designer coat. When it was over, they were gone. And so was everything that made Caleb Winslow, Caleb Winslow. He stood there, trying to understand how a man who ran a multi-billion-dollar hotel empire could be rendered invisible in under 3 minutes. No ID, no phone, no cash, no way to call for help, no driver to summon. It was the kind of situation he had read about in police reports or seen in films, never once believing it could happen to him. For the first time in a long time, Caleb had no plan, no power, no name. It took a while to start walking. The nearest avenue was 5 blocks east, and each step felt like a slow undoing of the life he'd built. No one looked at him twice. He could have been anyone. A man late for work, a guy who forgot his wallet. No one knew who he was, and for once, that wasn't a good thing. He kept his head down until he saw the bus stop. Public transit hadn't been part of Caleb's life since college. Even then, it had been rare. There had always been cars, drivers, sleek black vehicles with tinted windows and leather seats. But now, the irony wasn't lost on him. One of the richest men in the city, waiting for a bus with no way to pay for it. A few people stood scattered under the faded sign. One of them was a girl, young, maybe mid-20s, dressed in a uniform with a name tag pinned crookedly to her shirt. She was counting coins with focused precision, mumbling something under her breath. Caleb took the far end of the bench and kept his eyes on the ground. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want anyone to recognize him. He just wanted to get home. The bus pulled up, brakes whining. She was first on. Caleb waited, watching people climb aboard. He moved last, stepping up and nodding politely at the driver. When asked for payment, he paused. I don't have it, he said quietly. I was robbed. They took everything. I just need to get home. The driver didn't flinch. No money, no ride. Happens every day. Caleb tried again, not raising his voice, but pushing the words out with more clarity. Look, I know how it sounds, but I'm not making this up. The driver crossed his arms. Next, and that was it. The door stayed open, but the verdict had been delivered. Caleb could either step off or stand there like a fool. Then a voice cut in. I'll cover him. It came from the girl with the name tag, already seated near the window. She didn't even look back when she said it, just pulled another few coins from her pocket and walked them to the front. No drama, no hesitation. The driver shrugged, punched in the fare, and moved on. Caleb got on. He didn't know what to say. He mumbled a quiet thanks and took a seat 3 rows ahead of her, unsure if he should look back. He didn't. The ride was quiet, the kind of silence that stretches out awkwardly when a dozen strangers are trying to ignore each other. But Caleb didn't feel like a stranger. Not really. He felt like an imposter, a man in the wrong seat, wearing the wrong clothes, stuck in the wrong story. He tried to focus on the rhythm of the road, the hum of tires beneath the frame, but his mind kept circling back to the girl. Why had she done that? People didn't just help strangers anymore. Not in this city. Not without a catch. She hadn't asked who he was. Hadn't looked impressed. She didn't know his name. And still, she paid. When her stop came, she stood and walked toward the exit like nothing had happened. Caleb couldn't help himself. He turned in his seat and called out, quietly but urgently. Hey. She looked back, just once. No smile, no expectation, just curious. Thank you, he said. You have no idea what that meant. She gave a small nod. Everyone needs help sometimes. Then she was gone. The bus doors closed. Caleb sat there, watching the sidewalk grow empty, unsure why the moment felt so significant. But it did. It felt like the kind of moment you don't recognize until years later when someone asks you where everything changed. And you say, at a bus stop. Because someone used their last $3 to believe in me. The next morning, Caleb couldn't stop thinking about her. He'd made it home the night before, walked the last few blocks to his building like a man returning from war. The doorman's eyes had widened, confused by Caleb's appearance and the lack of car, phone, anything that resembled the version of him everyone was used to seeing. But Caleb hadn't explained. Just nodded, rode the elevator, and sat in silence for hours. Now it was barely 7 a.m., and the thought still gnawed at him. She didn't know who he was. She didn't care. She didn't try to guess. She just helped. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she worked. But he remembered the uniform, dark blue shirt, thin silver name tag, a white apron tied around her waist. It had diner written all over it. A uniform made for early mornings and late nights. He walked through the lobby and called to the doorman on duty, James, who was still clearly rattled from the night before. "Morning, Mr. Winslow." Caleb didn't waste time. "James, I need your help. Do you know of any diners along the bus route that passes through downtown? Specifically ones with blue uniforms?" James blinked. Not off the top of my head, but I can find out." "Do that, please." Within 2 hours, Caleb was standing in front of a diner off Lincoln and 14th, a place that looked older than his entire building. But there it was, blue uniforms, silver name tags, the sound of clattering plates inside. He pushed open the door, trying to look like someone who belonged. He didn't expect to find her so quickly. She was behind the counter, setting coffee cups on a tray with mechanical focus. Her hair was pulled back. Her sleeves were rolled. She didn't notice him at first. Caleb stood still for a moment, then stepped closer. He hadn't planned what to say. He didn't even know if she'd remember him. She'd only seen him once, disheveled and desperate. Maybe that version of him hadn't made an impression. He wasn't used to that. But then she looked up. Recognition flickered across her face. She didn't smile, didn't say anything at first. Just stared, like she was making sure it was really him. "You," she said finally. "Me. What are you doing here?" "I came to settle a debt." She frowned slightly. "What debt? You paid my bus fare yesterday. I think it's only fair I return the favor." She laughed once, short and low. "It was $3. You don't owe me anything. At least let me buy you a coffee." She studied him for a second, then shrugged. "All right." She poured the coffee, placed it in front of him without ceremony, and moved back to her tray. Caleb took a sip. It wasn't anything special, burnt, slightly bitter, but it was real. Somehow, that made it perfect. "Have you been working here long?" he asked. 2 years. "And besides work?" She eyed him. "Why?" "Curious. I study business administration, night school, planning to open my own bakery someday." He raised an eyebrow. "That's impressive. It's a dream, still a long way off. But you're chasing it. Trying to." He leaned forward slightly. "I believe in you." She laughed again, this time more out of disbelief than amusement. "You met me yesterday. Some people you recognize right away." Before she could say anything else, another server called her name, and she stepped away. Caleb watched her go. There was something about the way she moved, efficient, steady, purposeful. He didn't know what it was, but being here felt good. The bell on the door jingled again a few days later as he returned, slipping into the same seat. This time, she saw him right away. "You're back," she said, setting a cup of coffee in front of him before he asked. "Couldn't stay away. Paying off more debts?" "I came prepared this time." She smirked and moved on. Caleb sat, letting the hum of the diner fill the space between them. When she finally had a moment to breathe, she leaned on the counter and looked at him again. "So what do you do?" He hesitated. "The hotel business." She nodded, thoughtful. "That explains why you were so opinionated about the coffee." "Maybe. And why'd you choose that field?" He paused, running a finger along the rim of the mug. "Because it was the easiest path." Doesn't sound easy. When you're born into a family that owns an empire, the path's laid out before you even know you're walking it. She didn't respond right away, just watched him. It was clear she wasn't someone who chased status. She was the kind who listened to intent. "And you?" He shifted. "Still dreaming about that bakery?" "Always. Biggest dream I have." "What's stopping you? Money? Time? Life? You don't seem like someone who gives up easily." "I'm not, but sometimes the road's longer than you think." Before either of them could say more, she was called away again. Caleb stayed behind, finishing his coffee slowly, watching her from across the room. He didn't know what this was. He didn't even know what he wanted from it. But he knew this. He would be back tomorrow. The next few days fell into a rhythm Caleb hadn't experienced since childhood. Every morning at 7:45, he stepped into the diner, nodded at the waitress behind the counter, and took his usual seat. She never asked what he wanted. The coffee was poured before he said a word. Sometimes she added a muffin, sometimes just a smirk. It wasn't a routine built from habit. It was something else, quiet, slow, and oddly comforting. Marley didn't say much at first, but slowly the exchanges grew longer, casual, familiar. She asked what kind of hotels he managed. He dodged the specifics. She never pushed. He noticed she only had one break per shift and always took it standing near the back door, staring at her phone like it held secrets the world wouldn't understand. Caleb never mentioned who he really was. He wasn't lying, not exactly, just choosing what to leave out. One night, around closing time, Caleb waited across the street, leaning against a rental car that wasn't his usual black SUV. Marley stepped out of the diner, wiping her hands on a towel tucked into her apron. She paused when she saw him. He smiled. Need a ride? She crossed her arms. Trying to pay off another debt? Maybe. She stared at him for a second too long, then shrugged and opened the door. The ride was quiet at first. Marley looked out the window, arms folded, eyes scanning the street. Caleb didn't say anything until they were 3 blocks from her apartment. Why do I feel like you were debating whether to get in? Because I was. Still not sure you trust me? I don't trust most people. Don't take it personal. He nodded, then said nothing. Marley didn't either. But when they reached her street, she didn't get out right away. Where do you live? She asked suddenly. Downtown. She tilted her head. One of those glass towers near the park? Something like that. She narrowed her eyes. You always give vague answers. I like mystery. I don't. Mystery usually comes with consequences. He smiled slightly but didn't argue. She opened the door and paused. See you tomorrow? Same time. She nodded once and disappeared into the stairwell. The next morning, she was already behind the counter when Caleb walked in. He noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, less guarded, more present. The coffee was hotter than usual. The air felt lighter. I'm thinking of trying something new today, he said, easing into the stool. She raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Maybe. Marley didn't flinch. She poured a darker roast and slid it across the counter. You seem like someone who needs something strong, but not bitter. He took a sip. Was that a compliment or an insult? Just an observation. It was good, smooth, clean, unexpected. I've got a question, she said once the rush had passed. You never talk about your job, not really. I told you, hotel business. That's not what I meant. She wiped her hands on a towel, leaned her elbows on the counter, and watched him. You ever think about quitting? He asked instead of answering. Almost every day. But you stay. Because I'm building something. He nodded. So am I. That would have been the end of it if she hadn't spotted him that night. It was late. Marley had just left her shift and was walking toward the bus stop when she saw the car. Not the beat-up rental he'd picked her up in, but something sleek, black, polished to a mirror finish. It was parked across the street from a high-rise hotel. Then she saw him. Caleb was standing on the curb, laughing with a man in a tailored suit. The suit didn't say friend. It said boardroom. Caleb shook hands, nodded politely, and stepped through the revolving doors like he belonged there. Because he did. Marley didn't move. She just watched. Something in her chest tightened, though she couldn't explain why. The next morning, she acted normal, served coffee, poured cream, didn't mention the night before. But she was watching now. She noticed how Caleb held his cup with deliberate control, how he listened, then redirected, how he spoke about clients and projects, without ever explaining who or what they were. And when she asked questions, he gave polished, practiced responses that never really said anything. On a quiet afternoon, she finally asked, "What's the name of the hotel you work for?" Caleb didn't flinch, but his silence stretched a second too long. "I don't think it matters," he said. "Oh, so it's a secret?" "Not a secret, just something I don't lead with." "Why not?" "Because people treat you different when they know." Marley crossed her arms. "And you think I would?" I didn't want to take that risk. She didn't say anything, but the space between them shifted, just enough to be noticed. That night, Marley sat on her apartment steps, phone in hand, debating whether to call anyone. She didn't. Instead, she scrolled through the news, local business headlines, updates on property deals, expansion plans, CEO transitions. There it was. Caleb Winslow, Executive Vice President of Winslow Group, listed heir to one of the top hotel conglomerates on the East Coast, scheduled to take over the company within the next year. She stared at the screen, not knowing what to feel. Not angry, not hurt, just unsettled. Because now, she didn't know which version of him was real. The next day, Marley didn't sleep in. She couldn't. Her shift didn't start until 9, but she was out of the house by 7, walking the long route, trying to shake the feeling that had been gnawing at her since last night. She hated secrets, hated half-truths more. And what bothered her most wasn't that Caleb was rich. It was that he hadn't trusted her enough to say so. He showed up at the diner like nothing had changed. Same casual clothes, same timing, same half-smile as he stepped through the door. She poured the coffee before he sat down, didn't say a word. "You look more serious than usual," he said, taking the cup. "Just thinking. About anything good?" "Haven't decided yet." Caleb studied her for a moment. He knew something was different. She wasn't playing along. She wasn't curious anymore. She was distant. "I need to ask you something," she said, not looking up. "You told me you worked in the hotel business. Why didn't you ever say it was Winslow Group?" He set his cup down slower than usual. "I figured you'd ask eventually." "So you were waiting?" "I wanted you to get to know me without my last name doing the talking." She nodded once, jaw tight. "It doesn't change who I am," he added. "It changes how I see you." Caleb stayed quiet. "I knew something felt off," Marley said. "You came here every day like this was the only place you could get coffee, but someone like you, someone with access to anything, doesn't just end up in a place like this unless he's trying to hide something." "I wasn't hiding," he said. "I was trying to breathe." She looked at him then, eyes sharp. "From what?" Caleb hesitated. "From being someone I never got to choose to be." The bell above the door rang, and a group of customers shuffled in. Marley grabbed a notepad and moved away without another word. Later that day, when she stepped out of the diner, Caleb was waiting by his car again. She paused at the top of the steps. "Are you following me?" He laughed once. "Let's just say I hoped you'd want a ride." She didn't answer, just walked past him and pulled open the door. He got in without another word. The drive was quiet until they were halfway to her apartment. "Are you mad?" he asked. "I'm trying to understand." Caleb nodded. "So am I." They stopped at the light near her street. Marley stared out the window. "Why would someone like you want to be treated like an ordinary guy?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because sometimes being ordinary feels more honest than pretending I'm in control." She glanced at him, but he didn't elaborate. When the car rolled to a stop outside her building, she didn't get out immediately. "What do you really want, Caleb?" He leaned back. "I'm figuring that out." She opened the door, stepped out, and paused before closing it. "I hope you do." The next morning, Caleb didn't show. For the first time in weeks, Marley worked her shift without watching the door. But she noticed the absence. The counter felt too quiet, the air too still. Her mom noticed the shift in her when she got home that night. "You're quiet." "I met someone," Marley said. "Isn't that supposed to be a good thing?" It was. Then it wasn't. Her mother smiled, handed her a mug of tea. "Did he lie?" "Not exactly." "Then maybe he was just waiting for the right moment to tell you." Marley didn't answer. She didn't know what the right moment was supposed to feel like. The next morning, Caleb showed up again. Same seat, same cup, but a different energy. He looked tired, but more open. "I've been thinking about what you said," he started. "Which part?" "About me hiding who I am." She didn't respond. He continued anyway. "You were right. I shouldn't have kept that from you." "It's not about money, Caleb. It's about trust." "I know. He looked at the counter, then back at her. "Since I was a kid, I was expected to take over everything. The business, the legacy, all of it. No choices, no breaks. Every person I met wanted something from me, even before they knew me." Marley leaned on the counter but said nothing. "I got tired of pretending like I was okay with that." "And ending up here?" she asked. "That was part of the plan?" "No, that was the best mistake I ever made." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "Everything changed the moment you dropped those coins for me. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. That's the first time I felt seen without expectations." A customer called for Marley's attention. She stepped away, but his words lingered. That evening, when she left the diner, Caleb was outside again. This time, she didn't say anything. She just opened the door and got in. Halfway through the ride, he asked, "Can we take a detour?" "Where to?" "You'll see." 10 minutes later, they pulled into a small, quiet park. The sun was dipping low. Lights flickered across the gazebo in the middle. Marley had never been there. "I come here when I need to think," he said as they sat on a bench. "What are you thinking about now?" "That this might be the first real thing I've ever had." She didn't speak. Didn't need to. The silence held. When he dropped her off that night, she paused at her door. "You'll be at the diner tomorrow?" "I will." She nodded once and went inside. Caleb stayed in the car, watching the building, knowing something had shifted again. This time for the better. But he also knew better than to believe that was the end of it. The next morning, Caleb walked into the diner like he always did. Marley didn't look up right away, but she had already poured the coffee. He took his seat, watched the steam rise from the cup, and waited for her to speak. "You're really consistent," she said eventually, sliding a plate toward him. "I like habits." "I thought someone like you lived on jet lag in business class." "I'm off the clock." She raised an eyebrow but didn't challenge it. The air between them had changed again, more familiar, more settled. Caleb wasn't pushing, and Marley wasn't pulling away. "I want to show you something," he said as she cleared a nearby table. "Depends. Is it a yacht?" "No, just a picture." He pulled out his phone and flipped to a photo, a hotel overlooking the ocean, white facade, clean lines, palm trees in the distance. He turned the screen toward her. "This is one of ours. I helped design the interior when I was 27. She stared at the image. "Looks expensive." "It is. What are you showing me this for?" He hesitated. "Because there's a cafe inside. I thought of you the last time I visited." She handed the phone back. "You're really trying hard to convince me you're just a regular guy." "I'm not, but I'm trying to be a better one." Marley didn't respond, just went back to work. But later, when things slowed down, she returned to the counter. "So, what are you doing with all that hotel experience now? Still building luxury towers?" "I've been thinking about starting something different," Caleb said. "Smaller, more personal, something that matters." "You're already rich. Why bother?" "Because money isn't the problem. Purpose is." She looked at him carefully. "And what does purpose look like to someone like you?" He shrugged. "Maybe a hotel in a quiet town. No high rises, no boardrooms. A real place." Marley raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you've been watching too many indie films." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally being honest." The next time he picked her up after work, she didn't hesitate to get in the car. They didn't say much on the way back, but just before she stepped out, Caleb asked, "If I told you I wanted to build something new, would you believe me?" "Depends what you're building." He looked at her. "Something that includes you." The question lingered in the air, even after she closed the door. That night, Marley barely slept. Her thoughts kept looping back to the idea. It was ridiculous. And yet, something about it felt grounded. Caleb wasn't just another rich guy slumming it for entertainment. He was showing up, listening, staying. The following week, Caleb returned with a proposal. "A coastal town," he said over coffee. "Small. Not too far. It's where my parents used to take me as a kid. There's an old estate by the water, abandoned for years. Needs everything. But it has potential." Marley listened. "I want to restore it, not rebuild. Keep the bones, give it new life. And I want a cafe in the lobby. But not just a cafe, your cafe." Marley blinked. "You're serious. Completely. I don't even have a menu. Then we'll start with that." She stared at him like he had lost his mind, and maybe he had, but the idea was planted now. The next day, they drove out to see the place. The house was old. Weathered shutters, ivy creeping up the side, cracked stone steps. But Caleb wasn't looking at what it was. He was seeing what it could become. Marley walked through the empty space, room by room. She imagined ovens, tables, a blackboard menu, the smell of cinnamon rolls and espresso. For the first time in a long time, she saw more than just survival. She saw a beginning. "I'll need time," she said on the ride back. "You'll have it. And control. All yours. No corporate red tape." I walked away from all of that. She turned to him. "Why me?" Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Because you believed in me when I didn't look like someone worth believing in." They spent the next few weeks planning. Caleb handled permits and logistics. Marley worked on recipes, branding, suppliers. Every detail mattered. What type of wood for the counters, the font on the napkins, the color of the to-go cups. It wasn't always smooth. Contractors complained. Budgets shifted. Delays popped up. One morning, Caleb walked in with a stack of papers and dropped them on the table. The structural report came back. We're looking at double the original cost. Marley stared at the numbers. We can cut some corners, he offered. Cheaper materials, smaller kitchen. She shook her head. No, we do it right, or we don't do it at all. You sure? I didn't come this far to build something half-finished. Caleb smiled. Good, because I didn't either. They pushed forward. Some townspeople doubted them, called it a vanity project, said it would never open, said they'd be gone by winter. But Caleb and Marley kept showing up, every morning, every meeting, every delivery. And slowly, the estate began to transform. Marley tested cakes in a borrowed oven. Caleb learned the difference between hardwood and laminate. They argued about music playlists and light fixtures. But somehow, it all worked. One night, after a 12-hour day, they sat on the back steps of the building, eating leftover pastries and watching the ocean blur into the horizon. This is the craziest thing I've ever done, she said. Same. I'm terrified. I'd be worried if you weren't. She looked at him. What if we fail? Caleb didn't hesitate. Then we fail together. And in that moment, failure didn't feel like the worst outcome. Not anymore. They were 3 weeks out from opening when the first real crack appeared. Caleb walked into the temporary office they'd set up in what used to be the library of the old estate. Marley was bent over a stack of invoices, red pen in hand. She didn't look up when he entered. We've got a problem, he said. Marley circled a number and waited. The new engineering report says the foundation needs reinforcement. If we don't do it, the insurance won't approve occupancy. She sat up. How much? Another $100,000. Marley leaned back, stared at the ceiling, then at him. Do we even have that? I do, barely. But if I put it in, we delay everything. Opening date, marketing launch, the whole rollout. She nodded once. Okay, that's it. I'd rather delay than open a bakery in a building that might fall into the sea. Caleb cracked a small smile. You're not panicking. Oh, I am, just on the inside. They pushed the date back 6 weeks. Marley rewrote the menu to fit a tighter supply chain. Caleb canceled 2 trips and ignored a request from his father to fly back to New York for a board meeting. He sent one sentence in reply, I'm out. That evening, Marley found him sitting on the front steps. What did he say? She asked. Nothing yet, but it's coming. Do you regret it? No, she sat next to him. You're the only rich guy I know who walked away from being richer. I'm not sure what I walked into yet. You walked into drywall dust, inconsistent power, and my bad temper. I've had worse. The next morning, Marley's phone buzzed while she was restocking the bakery shelves. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. She answered anyway. A male voice on the other end. Marley, it's been a while. She froze. Eric? Just checking in. Heard you've got something going on by the coast. Her grip tightened. How did you get this number? It's not hard. Small world. Don't call me again. I just want to talk. She ended the call without another word. Later that day, Caleb noticed something off. She was quieter, focused, but in the way people are when they're trying not to think about something else. Everything okay? He asked as they tested a new espresso blend. Fine. He waited. Just an old name from an old life. Do I need to be worried? No, he doesn't matter. Then why are you still thinking about it? Marley set the tasting spoon down. Because ghosts don't knock. They just walk in. Caleb didn't ask again, but he made a mental note. The next afternoon, while Marley was busy arranging the new furniture deliveries, Caleb did his own digging. It didn't take long to find out who Eric was. Ex-boyfriend, former business partner, a man who had once told Marley that no one would ever buy bread from someone like her. Caleb closed the laptop and stood up without a word. That night, as Marley locked the bakery, he was already waiting outside. Leaning against the truck, arms folded. Promise me something, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Don't let someone from your past rewrite the story we're building now. She looked at him. I'm not the one with unfinished business. He nodded. Fair enough. They drove home in silence. But it wasn't heavy, just settled. A few days later, the bakery's first test batch came out of the oven. Caleb took one bite of a cinnamon twist and smiled. This tastes like something people would drive hours for. Marley pretended not to react. I'll put it on the maybe list. By now, word had started to spread. Locals peeked in during construction. Some called the project a money pit. Others were curious. Tourists from nearby towns began to ask questions. Caleb handled permits. Marley finalized packaging. The space transformed. What used to be a crumbling parlor now smelled like vanilla, coffee, and ambition. Then came the letter, delivered by courier, black envelope, wax seal, from his father. Caleb read it once and said nothing. That night, he told Marley. He wants to meet. Why? He says it's urgent. Are you going? I need to know what he wants. She didn't argue, but her silence said enough. He left the next morning and came back late, jaw set. What did he say? She asked. That I'm wasting everything, that I'm chasing some coastal fairy tale when I could be running an empire. And what did you say? That I'm not going back. She looked at him for a long time. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The following week, they hung the sign above the bakery door. Luna and Finch, her idea, his middle name. Opening day arrived on a Saturday, sun high, crowd larger than expected. Locals, strangers, a travel blogger with a camera. Even Caleb's old mentor from the city showed up unannounced, said nothing, and bought a dozen almond croissants. Marley kept moving, oven to counter, counter to register. Caleb poured coffee and cleared tables. No hierarchy, no titles, just two people building something together. That night, after the last customer left, they sat on the patio, legs stretched, hands wrapped around mugs. You know what the best part of today was? Caleb asked. The fact we didn't burn down the kitchen? No, watching you work, seeing what you've built. She looked at him. You helped. I just gave it a push. You made it fly. She didn't respond right away, just nodded slowly. Then, you remember that bus? He laughed. Hard to forget. That $3 was the best investment I ever made. He smiled. Same. The bakery thrived faster than either of them predicted. Word spread beyond the coastal town. A few local articles called it the little cafe that could. A feature landed in a lifestyle magazine. Weekend crowds started arriving early, lining up before doors even opened. Caleb joked about installing velvet ropes. Marley just rolled her eyes and doubled the cinnamon twist batch. They fell into a rhythm that didn't feel choreographed, but natural. Caleb managed the hotel, handled the numbers, oversaw staff. Marley ran the kitchen, trained baristas, curated the menu with the precision of someone who never forgot what it meant to earn every dollar. One morning, after a particularly long stretch of back-to-back service, Caleb walked in late, hair still damp from the ocean. Marley didn't greet him with a hello. She pointed to the espresso machine. You're on register today. I'm the owner. You're also the guy who broke the label printer yesterday. He laughed and tied on an apron. Customers began to notice them, how they moved around each other, didn't finish sentences, but always understood where the other was going. There was no announcement, no declarations, but something about them made people linger longer than their coffee required. Then came the night Caleb stopped in the middle of inventory, pulled a ring from his pocket, and dropped to one knee without warning. Marley didn't blink. If this is a prank, it's not. You better not be using the label printer budget for that ring. I used my own card. She stared at him for a full beat, then said, yes, so casually it felt like she'd been waiting for the question since the second day they met. The wedding was small, just them, a few close friends, the bakery staff, and a backdrop of ocean and string lights. No tuxes, no drama. Marley wore a white dress she found secondhand and customized herself. Caleb ditched his family's expectations and read vows he'd written on a napkin 20 minutes before the ceremony. Afterward, they danced barefoot behind the cafe. Someone played guitar. Someone brought pie. A child spilled lemonade on Caleb's shirt and apologized with a hug. Marley said it was the perfect metaphor for their future. Messy, unfiltered, full of sweetness and surprises. Months passed. The hotel stayed full. The bakery stayed booked. Marley expanded the kitchen. Caleb hired a small team and cut back his hours. They took afternoons off sometimes, just to walk through the local farmer's market or nap under the window fan when the summer heat rolled in. It wasn't a fairy tale. They argued. They forgot anniversaries. Caleb once ordered biodegradable straws that melted in hot drinks. Marley accidentally scheduled two bands to play the same night. But they always circled back to the same truth. They were building something real, brick by brick, recipe by recipe. Then, one evening, the phone rang again. Marley didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. It was Eric. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. Said he'd read about the bakery. Said he was sorry for the past, for the things he'd said, for never believing in her. Marley listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, he said, "I just thought you should know. You were always better than the life we tried to build." She paused, then answered, "I know." After she hung up, she didn't mention the call. Not right away. She just walked into the kitchen, took off her apron, and stood in the doorway watching Caleb refill the sugar jars. "I heard from Eric." Caleb didn't look up. "You okay?" "Yeah." "He apologized?" "Do you believe him?" "I don't have to. That's his burden now, not mine." Caleb nodded and kept working. That night, they sat on the back porch again, the same spot where they'd first dreamed about the future. Marley sipped a cup of tea while Caleb flipped through a sketchbook filled with expansion ideas. More rooms, a rooftop greenhouse, maybe a second location someday. But Marley wasn't thinking about growth. "You ever wonder if this was all supposed to happen?" she asked. "Like fate?" "No. Like maybe the wrong turn, the robbery, the bus, the coffee. All of it wasn't wrong at all." Caleb tilted his head. "Sometimes the detour is the path." Marley smiled, then said nothing else. The bakery stayed open late that weekend. A few locals brought instruments and played out front. Tourists joined in. Children danced between tables. Someone painted a small mural on the alley wall behind the kitchen. Marley and Caleb in cartoon style, holding coffee cups, surrounded by sunflowers and clouds. The next morning, a kid walked up to the counter, clutching 3 crumpled dollars in his hand. "I forgot my wallet," he said. "But I really wanted to try the chocolate croissant." Caleb didn't hesitate. "It's on the house." Marley looked over from the espresso machine and raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "Just paying it forward." The kid grinned and ran off, croissant in hand. As the door swung shut, Marley turned to Caleb. "Full circle. Almost poetic," she smiled. Outside, the line was already forming again. Inside, 2 people who had once been lost in the noise of the world stood steady in the quiet hum of something they'd made together. Not perfect, but honest. And sometimes, that's the kind of wealth that matters most. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's story. We're deeply grateful for your presence, your attention, and the space you made in your day to reflect with us. The story we shared wasn't just about love or success. It was about the unexpected power of kindness, the courage to change, and the beauty of building something real from the simplest moments. If this story moved you in any way, the best way to support our channel is simple. Just hit the like button. Leave us a comment below to tell us where you're watching from and how the story made you feel. Your thoughts truly matter to us and help guide the stories we tell next. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another moment like this. We're here to share stories that matter, that uplift, and that remind us all what's worth holding on to. Thank you again for being part of this journey. We appreciate you more than you know.